Israel Adesanya vs. Dricus du Plessis was one of the most interesting UFC matches of the year on paper, and it actually lived up to the hype. Adesanya dominated the middleweight division for 5 years, winning his first 9 fights before getting out-wrestled by Jan Blachowicz in an attempt to become the light heavyweight champion as well. Adesanya's old kickboxing nemesis Alex Pereira finally defeated him after 3 more middleweight title defenses, but Adesanya KO'd Pereira in the rematch. Adesanya didn't get a rematch after getting upset by Sean Strickland on September 10, 2023. After going 13-3 in UFC over a 5-year period, he was suddenly coming back on August 17, 2024 in the Perth RAC Arena after a year layoff in a pick'em fight against new champion DDP, who has put together the best winning streak in the division since Adesanya, with a 7-0 record including a win over former champion Robert Whittaker to set up his title win over Strickland. Adesanya finally had his back to the wall in his 12th straight title fight because a loss to the division's newest sensation would mean he'd suddenly drop 3 out of 4 fights, and would basically have to take a step back to rebuild himself at middleweight, or potentially move up to light heavyweight, where a win would presumably set up a decisive match with champion Pereira, whose only UFC loss came to Adesanya. This fight with DDP was not only interesting in the sense that a win for Adesanya would re-establish him at the top, and give us a chance to see if he could once again avenge a loss by taking out Strickland. It was fascinating because this was one of the rare matches where the fighters were very different strikers stylistically, but still may have been evenly matched enough that the strategy wasn't going to be for the less rangy or less technical one to do their best to instead rely on their wrestling. Adesanya is incredibly technical, one of the fighters most responsible for finally raising the highest level of MMA striking to something resembling his previous profession, kickboxing, with his reliance on fakes, feints, stance switches, and more evolved striking combos to constantly thwart foes that hoped they were going to be able to take advantage of his striking, leaving him prone to their grappling. Izzy edging forward was obviously much safer than DDP rushing forward, but Adesanya still couldn't be as aggressive as he would have liked because there's a real threat of DDP taking him down, whereas DDP knows he doesn't have to worry about Adesanya's wrestling. Izzy keeping his jab hand out much of the time helped him maintain distance, and he did a lot of misdirection to try to create an opening. He mostly just wanted to touch DDP with his jab so he could follow up, so sometimes even the jab itself was largely just another distraction, while other times he really stepped into it to do damage. Adesanya has a 4-inch reach advantage, so his goal against DDP's very disciplined high guard was to go to the head in between the block and then follow the jab with a body shot. Adesanya did a great job of working the body, but DDP always kept his hands high protecting his head, so while he conceded the shots to the midsection and legs, he refused to give Adesanya the opening for the high kick knockout. In contrast to the technically proficient striking of Adesanya, du Plessis is one of the most unorthodox and unconventional strikers around. He violates the core tenets of striking by blitzing straight in, leaving his feet on many of his strikes, lunging at the opponent with loopy hooks, and so on. He is often underestimated because his striking isn't very smooth or technically refined, but there is a method to his madness, and his awkwardness makes him difficult to fight. He sets a lot of traps, and also has really bad body language that often makes him seem to be either gassed or hurt. He does a great job of disguising his rushes behind his stance switches, so he's not just biting down on the mouthpiece and doing the bald bull charge like Diego Sanchez. DDP is already in range when he starts his blitz, and has a great forward drive on his super fast explosions, making his timing tricky and the amount of distance he's able to cover quite surprising. While his style isn't one you would look to teach, because it's only possible for someone with amazing gifts of speed, athleticism, durability, and physicality, he has enough heart and determination to continue mustering the energy to charge full speed, and put everything into his punches despite getting hit a lot round after round. It's difficult to describe DDP's style without underestimating him, but while DDP may not be elite at any one aspect of MMA, he's incredibly durable and very well-rounded, having trained in judo, wrestling, and kickboxing from a young age. What separates DDP is that he always feels like the definition of a mixed martial artist. I mean, he doesn't simply possess a wide range of disparate skills, he actually tries to put together sequences where he incorporates as much of his skill set as he can. His blitz is setting up his wrestling, and his wrestling is setting up his punching while holding a body lock, and this punching while wrestling the opponent is setting up his choke. He doesn't think of all these skills as separate entities, but rather a chain of potential events where one method of attack gives him various options for the next, and he just keeps choosing the best follow-up based upon the opponent's reaction. He's a great MMA fighter because he's able to put all his skills together into these combos and sequences, instinctually doing the right thing at the right time, or at least forcing his opponent to defend in a manner that provides him options to continue on the offensive. His physicality certainly makes up for a lot, but he's just really difficult to deal with because he not only applies a ton of pressure, but can almost simultaneously do it in multiple disciplines. The way their styles mixed was riveting even during the slower portions, but this was certainly a back and forth war that was controlled by whoever was currently coming forward. It made sense that Adesanya's game plan was to keep du Plessis from charging at him, but that's not the way he normally fights. Adesanya usually moves laterally or backwards a lot more, looking to draw the opponent into a huge counter shot. Today he took the fight to DDP as much as he could, but DDP absorbed it until he made his aggressive pushes back. This was still tactical work from Adesanya, but different tactics, and DDP's charges made it a lot more of a firefight than you'd normally see from Izzy. Adesanya would start the rounds holding the center, with DDP giving him that control, but holding his ground beyond that. After a few minutes, DDP would start coming on with his bursts. When du Plessis goes, he forces as much offense as he can get away with. He's not a position fighter beyond trying to start his charge from as short a distance as he can, and he's certainly not someone who aims for incremental advantages, as his sequences are a barrage where he applies as much pressure as he can, and immediately seizes an opening when the opponent's defense can no longer keep up with his offense. DDP generally throws a big overhand right, then closes a lot of distance with a long left follow-up, and will keep going from there into another punch or a takedown if his opponent doesn't circle off. Since both fighters had their share of success in each round, they surely felt like they were winning, and their strategy was a success. That was playing out in the scoring as well, which was split 29-28 for du Plessis, with DDP's 10-9 second round being the only round all three judges agreed on. While to some extent the difference in the fight was that DDP had 4 takedowns, this is somewhat deceptive because the story of round 2 where Adesanya was able to get up but not get free didn't have much to do with the rest of the fight. DDP showed more fatigue, but Izzy seemed more flat as the fight progressed, with heavy arms from defending wrestling, whereas DDP still had his reserves even though his body language was much worse. The important aspect was that DDP's takedown attempts were always on his own terms. He could exploit an opening, but he was never grasping in desperation, praying for a respite from Izzy's stand-up like most of Adesanya's opponents. DDP was able to stand with Adesanya for as long as he needed to, and in fact the final striking numbers were almost equal. That's pretty amazing given the difference in technical skill. Adesanya is an amazing counter-striker, but while he landed a high percentage, as all of DDP's opponents do, he was barely able to counter DDP because DDP disguises his charge so well and closes distance so fast, combined with hitting so hard that the opponent doesn't want to gamble on standing their ground and eating shots in hopes of landing a better counter. Adesanya was instead trying to be much more proactive, fighting the opponent rather than doing what he's normally done and hoping it once again worked. After the fight, Izzy said he felt his shot was coming because DDP kept reacting to the body punches. DDP was very disciplined with his elite high guard though, and while he took a lot of damage to the body, he wasn't exposing his head to the high kick by guessing middle or low. The body shots certainly took their toll, but Adesanya couldn't really land much to the head beyond what he was able to get in between the block, the uppercut or the jab straight down the middle. The first round was the best start to finish round for Adesanya. He set himself up as the more consistent worker, using the jab and going to the body. Adesanya tried to prevent the blitz by keeping his jab hand out and switching stances often. Du Plessis does a great job with his stance switching to disguise his first attack though, and this was the key tactic of the fight because he gave himself options. He could lead with a kick to the open body, or blitz with a punch combination, or try to use a punch to set up the takedown. When he rushed, he wound up lunging because he's primarily trying to close as much distance as possible so he can keep alternating power punches before the opponent can get away. If Adesanya had a takedown game, DDP wouldn't be able to get away with his style so easily, but without that, DDP just gambled that he has enough speed and power that Adesanya would put most of his effort into trying to escape and re-establish position. If an opponent does try to hold their ground, DDP is arguably in on them so fast that he'll be inside their hook anyway. Adesanya wasn't so much looking to counter the blitz as hoping to get lucky while staying safe. He would put his arm out while leaning back to avoid, but his focus was on circling away from the danger back to the center of the octagon. Adesanya cut du Plessis' forehead with a knee early in the first. This was a close round, without a lot of big action. DDP landed the harder shots when he actually landed, which I assume is why one judge scored it for him, but Adesanya's distance control allowed him to be the more accurate and reliable fighter. Adesanya tried to be more aggressive early in the second, coming in behind the jab, but du Plessis dropped into a double leg takedown. Adesanya's primary goal when taken down is to get right back up while it's still a scramble, but that presents an opening for DDP to establish more dangerous control by taking the back and trying for the choke. Du Plessis' choke attempt forced Adesanya back to the ground to defend. Adesanya was up quickly and started pushing the pace, landing a good front kick to the belt line. Du Plessis was looking winded already. He missed a punch, but in an ugly drunken fashion, managed to drop into a leg pick while Adesanya was trying to re-establish distance. Adesanya spent the second half of the round defending the wrestling, so now it was even on the scorecards, but DDP had wore Adesanya down a lot, even though Adesanya disguises his fatigue a lot better than DDP does. Round 3 was the best of the fight. It was more wide open with more activity and big shots from both. Adesanya was backing du Plessis, which made DDP's blitzes easier to defend because he was already on his back foot or too far away. Adesanya countered the second punch of a blitz, a left straight, with his spinning elbow. Adesanya tried to go back to the elbow counter right away, but got nailed with a really hard left this time. Adesanya was focusing on circling out to the center, then re-establishing his forward pressure, rather than trying to counter DDP, and perhaps this sort of thing explained why. DDP had some momentum, and was starting to pressure Adesanya before he could establish distance. Adesanya managed to come back with a nice right hook though. Adesanya still seemed somewhat hurt from the big punches earlier in the round. Probably due to this, he was willing to exchange a lot more often. DDP is sometimes willing to take punches to lull the opponent into standing in front of him. Moving less and bombing more was obviously an advantage for him because he has less technique and more power. Adesanya outlanded DDP this round because he did good work early, but as usual, DDP landed most of the significant damaging blows to go up 2-1. When Adesanya wasn't under pressure, he could land under or around the block, but then Dricus would probably try for the takedown. This was the case early in round 4, where Adesanya came forward with a nice 4-strike combo, but then had to defend the grappling. Adesanya had landed almost every body shot he threw in this fight, and it felt like it was finally about to pay off. Adesanya had good success following the jab with the uppercut in the latter stages, so he was doing solid damage with the second punch no matter what it was. DDP was looking tired during the early portion of the round, and getting outworked badly. Adesanya's confidence was rising as he was picking DDP apart, but it immediately became apparent how fatigued Adesanya actually was when DDP got another wind and quickly turned things around by pressing forward again. DDP making it messy wasn't a big issue when Adesanya was fresh. As the fight progressed though, even though DDP sometimes looked really fatigued, Adesanya was actually the one with his chin up, head exposed. When Adesanya was defending well, he was avoiding the left hook and throwing his own right hook while circling off to the right. In the fourth round when he was tired, he was backing straight out, or just turning and running away from DDP, first sideways and then when he got rocked, full on turning his back to him. The greatness of DDP in chaining his attacks together was on full display, mixing his power punches into his takedown attempt, which opened up the backpack, and led to the rear naked choke. Adesanya was initially dropped to a hand and a knee from a lead right, and he never really recovered. He stopped defending properly due to being disoriented, and just turned and ran. DDP had numerous options while Adesanya could only rely on outrunning him. DDP focused on landing free blind hooks because in this state Adesanya wasn't going to win a sprint, and thus was going to have to slow down to turn and face him if he didn't just lose trying to escape. DDP landed 5 unanswered on the blitz, then took Adesanya's back, with Adesanya reacting to all this really slowly. Dricus didn't even have the choke under the chin, but still finished because his offensive sequence was just faster than a rocked and defenseless Izzy could think to defend. I mean, Izzy was basically still in the mode of trying to defend the takedown even after getting hit 5 times and having his back taken. The fight just turned so fast. You went from thinking Adesanya was going to win this round at worst, making the 5th round winner takes all, to seeing du Plessis steamroll him and capture the title at 338 when he became the first fighter to ever submit Adesanya. DDP's body language might hurt him with the judges in the future, but as long as he keeps finishing fights, it's probably to his advantage because it gives his opponents a false sense of security. I'm sure Adesanya assumed DDP would either get outpointed or picked off, especially with Izzy connecting a lot more in the 3rd and 4th rounds. DDP's defense may not have been that great to begin with, but he's an extremely resilient fighter with a ton of mental fortitude who protects his head well, and has thus been able to avoid a crucial failure that allows the opponent to take him out with something he wasn't already giving away. Perhaps Adesanya was both confident and tired enough that he might have gotten himself in trouble by being a bit impatient and over-aggressive later in the fight. Either way, this was a great gutsy performance by DDP, where he really cemented himself as the man at 185. Very good match.